Hi guys, I'm Donna, an online therapist from talkforyourchange.com. And before I get started today, if you haven't watched my last vlog on perfectionism, be sure to check that out because it explains an important difference between a perfectionist and someone who is striving for excellence. Even if you're not a perfectionist, you may still be holding yourself to an unrealistically high standard. And if that's something you can identify with, then check this vlog out and I hope it gives you some insights. So today we're going to look at the ploy of perfectionism, and then I'm going to give you some insight into how you can reduce these effects of perfectionism in your life. And please remember to share this video, and if you're interested in more psychology videos like this, then please subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is in the link down below. So when we're confronted with a task in life, we have three possible approaches to doing it. Either we can avoid it and not do it at all, we could do it poorly, or we could do it well. So today I'm going to look at all three of those approaches and see how a perfectionist might experience them. Okay, so the first approach is to not do it at all, just to completely avoid it. In the 1700s, Voltaire said, "Perfect is the enemy of good." And this is the thinking that unless I can do it perfectly, I don't want to do it at all. Our fear of failure can be so strong that we only end up doing the things that we already know how to do really well. And to keep ourselves in check, we might employ strong self-criticism that talks us down whenever we feel really inspired or empowered to do something new, like a new challenge that we might fail at. All too often, this really critical voice is recognized as humility. And how many times have you heard someone say, I'm my worst critic? And we're so used to hearing this and feeling like this that we forget to recognize and reflect on the profound sadness of this statement. I mean, we're stuck with the inescapable voice in our head, and if that's one of deep criticism, then that could lead to a lot of suffering. And in situations like these where we want to do something, but we don't end up doing it because we're so afraid of failing at it or not getting it right on the first time, we might try and shrug it off or tell ourselves that it wasn't important, but often at the end of the day, we're left feeling like losers or like failures in some way. The second approach to doing something is to do it poorly. Now, in the Perfectionist Handbook, anything that is not done perfectly is seen as an outright fail. So 50% is not a pass for a perfectionist. Perfectionists are often people who have worked really hard and have often experienced difficulties, but are the overachievers and have usually had things come quite naturally to them and have never really experienced failure. This isn't necessarily a helpful thing because failure and struggle have very necessary roles in our lives. It's only through failing and trying again that we can really grow. And failure really helps us to build the resilience that we need in our lives. We often see things like failure and struggle as a reflection of our own ineptitude or uselessness. But actually, it's an inevitable part of learning. And recognizing this is pivotal. What's worse is in this social media frenzy that we're in today, we only ever see other people achieving. People only ever post their peak moments that may have taken hundreds or thousands of attempts to achieve, but we don't see that. And when we look around, sometimes all we see is other people achieving, and we might feel like we're the only ones failing. And this can lead us to be unnecessarily harsh on ourselves because we incorrectly believe that these other people are achieving these things very easily. Okay, so far we've looked at two different approaches, and the first one was when we look at something that we think we might not be perfect at, which might maybe only subconsciously frighten us, but it makes us want to leave it alone and just completely avoid it. And so we don't do it, but it leaves us feeling guilty or anxious. And the second approach is when we do try to do something, but maybe we didn't recognize how difficult it was, and so we ended up doing it poorly, which isn't a bad thing in and of itself. But when the perfectionist does this, they end up, again, beating themselves up and feeling really, really bad about themselves for this. And then the third approach is when you do something really well. Now, you would think that when a perfectionist does something really well, this would be when they finally give themselves a break. Well, no. Although perfectionists might be aiming for perfection, when they achieve it, a few interesting things happen. So either they can end up saying, yeah, that was good. Oh, that was actually easier than I thought. Any idiot can do it. No big deal. I don't deserve any credit for that. Or they subconsciously expect that somehow this perfectionist streak won't last and they're soon going to crash and burn. So often we don't expect good things to happen to us and for our lives to be really happy. If you think of so many movies in the beginning where a couple will have a meet cute and then they will slowly fall in love and meet each other's families, and we watch the montage of them having a wedding and moving into their first house and painting it and maybe falling pregnant. While we're watching this, we're often already preparing ourselves for the tragedy that we know is going to happen after the first 10 minutes. Because we know that they're never going to just keep on living these stupidly happy lives. And maybe the movie industry has influenced us, or maybe it's a reflection of how vulnerable we feel when we are actually very happy or feeling like something's going perfectly well. Because when things are going well in our lives, we often feel like they won't last. And often we can't even let down our guard enough to actually enjoy the time that we are happy. Another thing that often happens when things go really well is that our confidence can swing. Raj Shafra noted that perfectionists often have swing confidence, which is when things are going really, really well, you feel like you can take on the world. You feel brilliant, like you've got this. But the moment something goes badly or even just poorly, your confidence completely swings and you see yourself as a completely useless human being, unable to do anything right. So we're back to beating our poor selves up yet again. Isn't it so sad to consider that when we look at each of these three approaches to achieving any task, we can see that a perfectionist often ends up feeling really, really bad about themselves, no matter which approach they take. And that's so sad. My reason for looking at these approaches was to draw some awareness to how much a perfectionist can really, really struggle, and hopefully help you to get some motivation to want to change things a bit. Unfortunately, there's no magic cure that will suddenly transform you into a ray of self-loving sunshine, but I can offer some insight that you can actively use to work on your life. Become more aware of your day-to-day achievements. Ask yourself, what exactly am I trying to achieve? And break down bigger goals into smaller, more achievable ones. And when you do achieve even an incremental change, praise yourself for it, damn it. Don't let yourself just shrug it off. In a society so dependent on likes and recognition from others, we're losing the ability to recognize our own progress. It's also helpful to make sure that you don't underestimate the struggle and the difficulty necessary to achieve something. Ask yourself, do I have a full understanding of what is necessary to achieve this? It's so important to recognize the difficulty in the things that we want to achieve. And it's great if you can come from a place of knowledge. So if there is someone in your life that is doing something that you want to be doing, ask them about it. Ask them how they were able to get there. Or do some research on other people who've been able to achieve this. Or see how long it took them to be able to achieve this. Because if you actually start to expect something to be really difficult, then you stop panicking if you don't get it immediately right. Catch yourself when you find yourself automatically switching to the inner voice of self-criticism. And a really helpful way to deal with this is to treat yourself like you would treat one of your best friends. If your best friend was in the same situation as you, I'm sure you would be so much more loving and compassionate and encouraging towards them, but you're really critical and harsh towards yourself. Change that. Start to become more loving and compassionate towards yourself as well. We don't have to settle for the status quo of everyone being really, really critical towards themselves. I think that's really something worth fighting against. Remember, we're all stuck with our inner voice for our whole lives. And imagine if you could change that inner voice to be more compassionate and even your own cheerleader, what a pervasive difference that could make in your life. Look, I know that changing a perfectionist mindset is not easy and it might take a very long time. And another really effective way to help is to go to therapy, where one way you might tackle it is to examine where your critical voice came from. Maybe it was influenced by critical people in your childhood whose voices you internalized. And in therapy, you might be able to identify this criticism and reevaluate it. See how this criticism is serving you, and maybe practice replacing it with a different sort of voice, a more loving, nurturing one. Or you might use therapy to reinforce your new and revised, more self-accepting voice and make that more of the dominant narrator of your life story. Whether you decide to work through this in therapy or not, whatever you do, try and make an aim to develop core confidence. Core confidence is true confidence in yourself. Whether something goes well or not is not a reflection of your worth. Even if you fail at something and that sucks, you are still worthy of love and you're still good enough. And if you are interested in going to therapy and you do think that you and I would work well together, or if you know of someone else who you think might work well with me, then please go to talkfeelchange.com and check out my website where you can learn more about online therapy, watch more of my vlogs, and you can book a session. All right? I hope that was helpful. Thank you.